Hey everyone, Garbage here. When you get into making video games, you quickly realize that even the simplest things can be surprisingly complicated under the hood. And this has definitely been true for me lately, and so today, I have a mystery for you. In one of my previous videos, I was talking about leaning in first-person shooters, and quite a few of you mentioned that the optics I was using for the demonstration obscured too much of the screen. And it got me thinking, because if you look down at the end of a metal tube, the opening on the far side of the tube is going to appear smaller than the near side because of perspective. And so at least some of your vision is going to be obstructed by the inner walls of the tube. But as we all know, firearm optics are not just metal tubes. There's lenses inside, and so when you look through the end of one, you're seeing the magnified image of the lens at the front projected onto the lens at the back. It doesn't look like you're looking through a metal tube. Instead, you just see a circle with a magnified image in it. And indeed, in many FPS games, this is exactly what you see. But this is where things get a little weird. In first-person shooters, there are two general ways to handle scopes and optics with magnification. The first way is to zoom in the entire screen, and so when you aim down the sight, everything on your screen gets bigger. This method is very simple, and it's much more common than the other, more realistic method called picture-in-picture, where only the circular area inside the scope is magnified, while everything outside of it is not. And this method is used in games like Escape from Tarkov and Insurgency Sandstorm if you enable it in the settings. So first let's talk about picture-in-picture. There's probably more than one way to do this, but the general idea is that you have a main camera for your first-person perspective, and then a second camera contained within the scope that has a narrow field of view so that it can see things zoomed in. Then whatever zoomed in image the second camera sees is projected as a texture onto a flat panel embedded in the back of the scope, which is what you're looking at when you aim down the sights. And the result is a very realistic looking scope that gets magnification without zooming in the entire screen. It's called picture-in-picture because you're literally looking at a tiny zoomed in picture inside the scope within the larger picture of your screen. Incidentally, this also solves the issue of your vision being obscured by the inner walls of the scope because that part of it is hidden behind the projected image panel. One big downside to this method is that it can cause some performance issues, especially in low-end devices, because you're having to render the exact same scene twice. This is not an issue when using the other method, which is to zoom in the entire screen when aiming, because you don't have to deal with a second camera or projecting any images onto panels. It's just a hollow tube. But this is where it gets a little weird. Take Apex Legends for example. This game, like many others, does not use picture-in-picture in its sights and instead just zooms in the entire screen. However, when you do aim down the sight, you don't see the inner walls of the scope. The opening on the far side appears just as wide as the near side, which is not how perspective works. The far side should always appear smaller no matter what. My first guess was that when aiming, the game stops rendering everything except for the back face of the scope so that there wouldn't be anything there to block your view. But I don't know if that's right because you can actually see the front of the scope moving around slightly when you rotate your camera. Then I thought maybe there was some weird forced perspective thing going on, maybe deforming the mesh in some way to shorten the distance between the two ends of the scope. But not to toot my own horn or anything, but I feel like I would have noticed this if it were the case, but I haven't seen anything. Regardless, if true, then it must not apply to the rest of the gun because that always looks consistent unlike the scope. So maybe that isn't the answer either. And I've thought about other solutions like using an orthographic projection or a 2D overlay, but all of these introduce their own problems which can't be ignored, and to be honest, I just don't know. It's not just Apex Legends that does this, it's pretty much all FPS games where you're able to aim down sights, picture-in-picture or not. And so my question to you today is, what am I missing? How are these games doing this? If you have the answer, or if you just want to suggest a topic for a future video, let me know about it in the comments below. Hope you learned something. Come check out my second channel and Twitch channel where I stream all sorts of games most days of the week. Like, subscribe, bell, links to everything down in the description below. And as always, have a nice day.